Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got from Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak that's set to release on both the Nintendo Switch and on PC via Steam early next summer. And the news that we have to go over today I think are pretty major, and that's the fact that thanks to the official Japanese Monster Hunter Rise Twitter account, interestingly enough, not the North American account, which they haven't necessarily posted this just yet, but perhaps by the time this video goes up, they might have shared the news as well. They basically confirmed that new Silkbind attacks are going to be making their way into Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak for next year. And I'm going to read officially from their tweet as well. It says, Silkbind attacks that appeared in Monster Hunter Rise will have new versions of Silkbind attacks being added into Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. So please look forward to these new hunting actions. So there you go. I'm not sure if you need any more clarification other than the fact that they're saying that the brand new Silkbind attacks will be making their way into Sunbreak. Now, if I were a betting man, which I'm not, I would have probably easily guessed that they were going to be adding some sort of new Silkbind attacks. This is something that we just went over a couple of days ago when they shared a picture and they were talking about new actions making their way into the game, specifically when it comes to the wall. But they weren't very specific if they were like weapon related, maybe they were traversal related, maybe they were even Silkbind actions or Silkbind attacks or anything along those lines. They weren't very necessarily clear. With this post specifically, they're saying Silkbind attacks, no questions, no doubts. That's pretty much what they're talking about here. So basically brand new ones are going to be making their way into the game. Now, what does this ultimately mean for you as your typical gameplay experience, and specifically what weapons are going to be getting new Silkbind attacks? Presumably, if you look back at the history of Monster Hunter, pretty much the G rank updates, which is what Sunbreak usually will be, what Iceborne was to World, they end up trying to balance all the weapons equally as best as they can. It doesn't necessarily always work out, but this is pretty much what their goal ends up trying to be at the very least at the beginning of their development cycle. So usually I would love to actually know in this case how many weapons are so reliant in Silkbind attacks that pretty much use them necessarily in their meta attacks, pretty much in their meta combos. Remember that regardless of how you play the weapon that you're actually playing, there is a basic meta combo attack that you can focus on to do max damage, max output DPS. And a lot of these weapons make use of Silkbind attacks to be able to reach that max DPS output. Not all weapons are built the same way, therefore that means not all weapons are actually going to be able to have the opportunity to make the best use of these Silkbind attacks because they vary from weapon to weapon. Remember that even like heavy bowguns, I believe, have like a very defensive stand focused counter-attacking type of Silkbind attack, where like light bowguns are more using it for traversal and not necessarily for damage output, and different weapons have different ways to be able to utilize them, so it varies in that regard. So I'm interested to see actually what weapons would probably make the most amount of Silkbind attacks. I wish there was some sort of like comprehensive list or maybe a thread that actually breaks that down for me to be able to see which type of weapons presumably we can wager are most likely going to be able to get some type of offensive, maybe even traversal focused Silkbind attack that is going to be making that weapon a little bit more, let's say, potentially usable in the future. Obviously, it's hard to guess because we don't necessarily know how the developers are going to try to balance the game, whether it is the actual weapon basic combo attacks are going to get tweaked, or the damage output is simply just going to get raised, or they're going to try to balance them directly through the Silkbind attacks. We don't necessarily know, but it's definitely just another tool in their arsenal for them to be able to go ahead and try to basically make the best way possible for each one of the weapons to have all the abilities and be able to just do higher damage outputs, which presumably Sunbreak is going to require you to do as we head into G rank, Master rank, which is actually what they're calling it now. And monsters are going to have higher defenses. You're going to need higher attack output for you to be able to dish out tons of damage and be able to do, pretty decently well in any typical hunt. But when it comes to this specific news, I'm glad that they actually went ahead and confirmed it ahead of time. Remember that we do have the Game Awards coming up. I've talked about we should be expecting some type of trailer, whether that actually is for the PC version of Rise that is set to release in January, or they're actually going to give us a brand new trailer for Sunbreak, which is presumably what we should be expecting. It's anyone's guess, really. I don't necessarily know, but I know something is coming in that regard from the information that I've gathered from some of the people that I actually trust. But we don't necessarily know which one is going to be. Will this be something that they just probably show us a little bit of a glimpse of, or it's just going to be area and monster focus? Who knows? It's just going to be one of those things that we don't necessarily know. Obviously, we just have the information regarding Shogun Senator and Malzeno, but other than that, we don't even have the name of that new area, which they've dropped a couple of hints of already, talking about, I believe, the surroundings, which I actually wanted to make a separate video of now that I think about it. But they haven't necessarily told us even the name of that area, so I'm actually waiting for them to do that so I could actually cover that information entirely. But when it comes to just this Silkbind attack stuff, I'm just hopeful to see, again, just more weapon balancing. And if they decide to go that route, I think Silkbind attacks are definitely the best way to achieve that. I guess the question will be, how many Silkbind attacks do you think each weapon would probably realistically we should be expecting to get when it comes to the Sunbreak expansion? Personally, I think if they add 2 per weapon would probably be about as realistically as we can expect. I think going anything above 2, maybe even 3, would be just expecting too much realistically, because again, they need to provide for each one of the weapons. And essentially what I think, and kind of like the thing that I already touched upon, kind of cover the perhaps holes or gaps that the weapons already have. So weapons that have defensive or maneuverable based Silkbind attacks would most likely want to have offensive ones, or maybe a defensive one, or like other ones that are focusing just on offense would probably want to have more defensive ones or more movement based ones. So that is something where I think that covering that gap with 1 or 2 more Silkbind attacks would definitely go a long way. Also tweaking some of the ones that are kind of there already that are not necessarily always usable. Every single weapon feels like almost has that one Silkbind attack that is just kind of completely worthless, or you don't necessarily ever want to pick up because they're just kind of pointless. I know that there's a couple already when it comes to range weapons that no one ever uses because they just serve no purpose whatsoever. So adding perhaps some sort of damage modifiers, temporary boosters for damage, or maybe even like saving stamina or anything along those lines, any type of little beneficial boost that they can add into those ones that are less popular or less useful ones, which they now have the data on because obviously they're collecting all the information from the game. So maybe that would actually be one way to make those ones that people aren't necessarily using, make them more viable. But that's about all the information that I have for you guys today. Hopefully you guys found that informational. If you are brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.